Continuing to join us as we get started here, but we have so much tonight. My name is Kim Cockcroft. I'm the Minister for Faith Formation at Grace Church, and I'm just really excited to be here with all of you. As I thought about tonight, I felt a sense of expectation and gratitude for all of the presenters who are here tonight and for the content that we're able to present to all of you. I do want you to know that we are collecting everything that's being presented in a couple of ways. We're recording our sessions, and those will be available on the Grace YouTube page early next week. And we're also curating a list of resources for you that will be available at the end of this time together. So welcome. We're going to go right ahead and get started here. And I'd like to introduce Maggie Finley, who's been opening us with a reflection or a prayer. Maggie?
Yeah, I'm going to begin where we left off last week. We talked about transitional music and therapeutic music for people as they're making their transition. And so I offer this as our beginning in a similar spirit. Everything must change. Nothing stays the same. Everyone must change. No one stays the same. The young become the old, and mysteries do unfold. For that's the way of time. Nothing and no one goes unchanged. There are not many things in life you can be sure of, except rain comes from the clouds, sun lights up the sky, and hummingbirds do fly, and winter turns to spring. The wounded heart will heal, but never much too soon. Yes, everything must change. The young become the old. Life's mysteries do unfold, and that's the way of time, that no one and nothing goes unchanged. There are not many things in life you can be sure of, except rain comes from the clouds, sun lights up the sky, and butterflies do fly. The rain comes from the clouds, the sun lights up the sky, and music makes me cry.
Yay. Maggie, that was beautiful. Thank you. Loved that.
I heard somebody say, yay.
What a great beginning. Thank you.
Thank you.
The way we'll do tonight is I'll introduce each facilitator, and then they'll say some words about themselves so we can keep the content moving along tonight. Our next person I'm really excited to introduce to you is Stephen Dougherty. He is from Multicare, and he'll be talking to us about hospice tonight. So welcome, Stephen. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. It's as you know, someone that does outreach, I obviously enjoy talking with people and getting to interact with people, and I haven't gotten to do much of that this year. So it's refreshing to be with a group of people, even if it's virtually. So I've been, a little bit of background, I've been doing home health and hospice. I started doing only home health outreach in the South King County area. And then at the beginning of this year in January, I joined the multi-care team and started doing both home health and hospice. And it's been a pretty amazing journey to learn about hospice and see people's stories as they come through hospice. And so I'm hoping that I can share some of that with you tonight. So let's see. I'm going to try and share my screen. Give me just a moment. It's asking for permissions for my computer. So Kim, I don't think that it's going to let me share without leaving the meeting and coming back.
No worries. I've got you covered. Which one would you like me to share first, Stephen?
Well, I guess I'll just walk through. I'll just walk through the PowerPoint. If there's, and you can share this. I'll share this PowerPoint with you later, and you can share it with the team. So I'll start with talking about home health. I kind of want to give hospice some context and also talk about other home-based services. You know, if complications with your health are there, but you're not qualifying for hospice yet and you're not meeting that criteria, some of the other resources that are available. So home health is rehab focused. There is a homebound requirement, but it is covered by Medicare. And so if you're having even temporary medical setbacks, whether it's joint replacements or things like that, home health can be a great option to getting you back on your feet. And it is rehab focused and you do have to be homebound. Another program that CHI already has pretty well established, and multi-care, we just relaunched a palliative care program. And it's a community-based palliative care program, and it's a wraparound service that can be utilized in conjunction with other services, with the exception of hospice. Hospice is standalone, but community-based palliative care, if you or someone you know is really dealing with a lot of medical specialists and they've got their primary care physician and multiple specialists, oftentimes a palliative care doctor, they're allowed a little more time hands-on with the patient. And our team is really focused on, as the patient, what are your goals of care, and really helping to navigate the patient and the fellow providers, the PCPs, primary care physicians that are involved in doing, in helping find the patient's goals of care and making sure that those are achieved. And then that brings us to hospice. Hospice is, we like to say, care beyond the cure. It is for people with a life-limiting illness, and hospice provides care, comfort, and support for both patients and their families. So, I want to read our multi-care's hospice philosophy. Hospice is care beyond a cure for people with a life-limiting illness. Hospice provides support and care for those in the last phase of an incurable disease so that they may live as fully and as comfortably as possible. Hospice aims to neither hasten nor postpone death, rather focusing on enhancing the quality of the remaining life for the patient, family, and caregivers. Multi-care hospice does this regardless of age, gender, nationality, race, creed, sexual orientation, disability, or even ability to pay. And that's something we're really proud of. And, multi-care has a phenomenal foundation that supports the hospice team as well as the rest of the multi-care organization. So the flyer that's up in front of you there on the screen is, when is it time for hospice? So what sorts of things are you looking for? We always are sad when we see people miss out on the opportunity to really take advantage of hospice. Hospice is covered 100% by most insurances. Um, and so making sure that you take advantage of that benefit and the care that comes with it. So if you or a loved one notices significant weight loss, um, uh, spending a lot of time sleeping, and this is more than just 12 or 13 hours. This is a significant amount of the day is spent sleeping. Frequent falls, declining in functional or mental status. You're starting to notice more and more emergency room visits, maybe skin breakdown from being either bedbound or chairbound, or other areas, or the patient or family just decides that it is time for hospice. That often comes when you're struggling with something like cancer. You have a care team that is gonna be there and is gonna push you, and is, uh, oncologists are phenomenal at what they do, and then they're there to support you. But sometimes a patient and a family will decide that, you know what, I think I'm done fighting, and I just want to enjoy the time that I have left with my family. And so that's where that patient decision really comes in. So hospice is made up of a whole team of individuals. We have doctors, we have nurse practitioners. I don't think we have any physician assistants, but I'm sure that other hospice companies may have those. We have nurses, we have medical social workers, hospice aides, comfort therapies, and hospice volunteers that are absolutely phenomenal. And then we have a bereavement team. And I'm going to kind of dive deeper into each one of those categories. So the medical providers are there to typically supplement your primary care provider. So you still, while you're on hospice, you still can see your primary care physician if you have a good long-standing relationship with them. We absolutely want you to keep that. If you decide that you would like our provider team to take over care, they're willing to do that as well. So our team is really dynamic and really there to support the patient and the patient's wishes. And they're also on a very short leash, and our nurses are almost always able to reach out and get to a provider in case there's an emergency. We have 24/7 hospice nurse triage, and then we always have a provider supporting that triage team. So there's always, if pain becomes unmanageable, if meds need refilled, if there's something that jumps out on you unexpectedly, there's always a provider team there to support. Our nurses, one thing I've learned having done this over the last year is, well, I guess this can be said for the whole care team, not just the nurses, but they are really special individuals that are incredibly passionate about what they do. And I think you're going to be hard pressed to find any hospice nurse that just shows up and does the work because it's a job. There's a true deep passion amongst all of the care team, from the providers to chaplains and nurses and everything. So we have medical social workers, and they're really there to help connect with resources. They they have their Mary Poppins bag, so to speak. I'm always blown away when I ask a social worker a question. They have all these different creative resources. If you're a veteran, we have several social workers. One social worker that spent most of her career with the VA, and so knowing how to navigate those benefits. And that's actually something that we have on the home health side as well, that's not often known about. And so, if you end up on home health earlier and you need help connecting with some of those VA benefits and knowing what's down the road and what's available, the social work team, I think, often gets bundled in with, oh, I don't need to talk about my feelings, which we often do need to talk about our feelings, and they're there for that as well. But they're also there for a plethora of resources. Although hospice, and I cover this in a later slide, but although hospice doesn't cover 24-hour caregiving, we do have hospice aides, and the hospice aides are able to come in for a couple hours a week, help you bathe if you need transferred to do that, if it's a bed bath that they're needing to give. They're just there to support in whatever they can, in whatever way they can for that couple hours a week that they're there. Spiritual care. I know often, it looks like you guys have a great church family, and we have that support, but we also have chaplains that can come out and just be there to pray, be there to share beautiful songs with us, and just help comfort us at that time. Something that is unique to, I guess I'll say, the larger healthcare systems and their hospice programs. I'm not 100% sure what CHI has in terms of comfort therapies, but our comfort therapies are covered 100% and they're funded through our foundation. So it is not something that Medicare covers the cost of. It's something that generous folks donate. And so Multicare is able to provide massage therapy, music therapy, Reiki, aromatherapy, and when we have pets available, pet therapy. And I know that when COVID initially hit, we stopped doing pet therapy, and I don't know if we've continued, but I think I just saw a dog in the office the other day, so I'm hoping we are continuing it, because pets can be powerful. And then our volunteers, and they are incredibly hardworking, and we're very grateful for all of the work that they do. And I'll run down the list of things, but if errands, household tasks, patient companionship, our pet therapy team is a volunteer team. Oftentimes respite, if someone just needs a little bit of a break, volunteer can provide some respite. support calls, and just touching base with you. Sunshine notes, our volunteer team sends warm notes to our hospice patients often. Tuck-in calls, and we also have a very strong veterans to veterans program. So having veterans that are supporting our veterans that are on hospice. And last but definitely not least is our bereavement team. And I will say, whether you or a loved one are on multi-care hospice or not, if you've recently lost a loved one, or if you go through the loss of a loved one, our bereavement team is always there for pretty much everyone. They're happy to help both the community as well as our patients, and they tend to stay in touch for about 13 months after the death of a loved one. And they have literature and resources. They have telephone outreach that they do. I know we had a really strong grief support group system. I think that is on hold, but they may be doing it virtually. And then individual and family counseling. We have a great group of counselors that support our patients and families. So now to cover some of the frequently asked questions. Does hospice cover personal caregiving? And that is unfortunately no. Hospice doesn't cover like 24/7 caregiving. We do have hospice aides, like I mentioned before. A resource for folks that may be looking at needing a little extra support is retirementconnection.com. That is a phenomenal resource that has everything from senior living facilities, memory care facilities, senior services, caregiving. I mean, you name it for seniors. They have a pretty comprehensive database of resources. Does hospice hasten my death? And that's no. Actually, what they find is that people that are really struggling with pain, getting relief from that pain, can often extend life and help people have a little bit longer and a little bit more fullness to their last days. So, and can I keep my doctor? And the answer to that is yes, you can keep your doctor. We partner with community physicians and specialty providers, work really closely with them. And then you can go to your routine appointments as well. And that hospice does not prevent you from doing that. So I need hospice. How do I start? And I have two answers to that. You can either talk with your PCP specialist that you're working with, whether that be an oncologist or other specialist, or if you end up in the hospital, talk with the hospitalists about hospice care. Make your goals of care very clear, and I think that throughout, from even a young age and on to hospice, communicating our wishes to our medical care team is critically important. And then they'll send a referral. The plan B, if you don't remember any of that, is to call me. I am happy to share my work cell phone number. If you ever have any questions down the road, if you are needing hospice and want to see if you qualify, we can have one of our nurse intake folks review your chart and talk with you over the phone and determine whether or not you or your loved one would meet the hospice criteria. So that's all I have. I see some questions starting to pop up. Let's see if I can bring up the chat window here.
I can just
Um,
ask them too, if you'd like me to, Stephen.
yeah,
We have about 4 minutes for questions here. And the first one is, how can these services be made available during the pandemic, especially by volunteers?
yeah. So we have incredibly strict protocols for our nurses that are coming into people's homes. Um, they essentially treat everyone as though they're COVID positive. So no matter whose home they're going into, they are wearing masks and face shields, and taking an abundance of precautions. We've actually completely segregated our administrative team from our clinical team. So almost all of our meetings are virtual except for like critical skills labs and things like that, um, to ensure um, minimal contact with the office and vice versa. And our volunteers are also following those precautions, and we are doing a lot more stuff virtually. We're sending a lot more notes instead of going and visiting people. And some skilled nursing facilities, and you can be in a skilled nursing facility and on hospice at the same time, depending on your insurance. And some skilled nursing facilities will only let our nurses in and won't let any of the other care team in. And again, you guys are in the driver's seat. And if you feel like that's what you would be most comfortable with, you don't want a social worker coming out, you don't want the chaplain coming out, they can call me on the phone. I don't want the exposure. Absolutely. And we work with you on that. We do provide services to Bainbridge Island. So multi-care covers South King County, Pierce County, and Kitsap County. I think the only area that we do not go to is Vashon Island. So, and some of the other islands that require boats. So, and yes, you do need a medical referral to get onto hospice. If you think you or your loved one qualify for hospice, and you're not able to obtain that referral, you can reach out to us. Again, we have a doctor as our medical director, and so she can certify that Medicare requires it appear that there is less than 6 months to live, and if you do live beyond that 6 months, that's no problem. That benefit extends indefinitely. I was looking the other day, and I think we've had a patient on for over 1,000 days. So that's 3 years almost. And as long as they continue to meet the Medicare hospice criteria, then Medicare continues to pay for that benefit. So.
Great,
So
thank you.
I I think, Kim, I don't know if you have my signature block, but I am more than happy to have you share both my email and my cell phone number. I have no problem with that. That is 100% what I'm here for. If you do call me, I'm happy to answer, and we'll start a new conversation. So yep.
That's wonderful. Stephen, is it all right if I do that in the chat window before this meeting's over?
Yep.
Okay,
Absolutely.
fabulous. Thank you
And
so much.
I can do that while you move on to the next person. So.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much for being here. That was incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
And I hope you will get in touch with Stephen if you have more questions that come to you after this. Johanna Munson is here, and she's a death doula in our community, and she's going to tell us what it means to be a death doula. Thank you, Johanna.
Great, thank you. And I just want to say we did go through multi-care hospice for my dad's end of life, and they are just an amazing team. It was before the pandemic, so we had just amazing visits from so many great members of their team. So you're probably familiar with the idea of a birth doula. That's a companion who creates a birth plan with a pregnant woman and her family, and then assists at the birth to ensure that the needs and her needs and wishes are honored. So my role as a death doula is similar in that I work with individuals and families to create peace around the idea of death and dying. I take on this role as sacred work. My mission is to act as a guide for those willing to explore their humanity and approach their death in a deeply loving manner. Many of us shy away from the idea of death, and yet it is really the only way out of this existence. When we have the courage to look at death, we can pause and take stock of who we are and who we want to be, what we have accomplished and what is still to be done, and what matters most to us in whatever time we have left. So what does this look like in practice? Every death doula is unique as they bring their own life experience to the table. I bring my deep love of learning, my skills in planning and discernment, and my training in communications and self-awareness. I am a member of the National End-of-Life Doula Alliance and have completed level 2 of doula training with a group in Seattle called A Sacred Passing. Doulas are non-medical professionals, so we don't give medications or offer any medical advice. And it is private pay at this point. Hopefully at some point, the hospice organizations will recognize the value of what we do, and we'll be able to work through those organizations. My offerings include end-of-life planning, individual and family support at the actual end of life, and creative approaches to generating conversations about death. Because of the pandemic, right now my focus is on creating end-of-life plans with people of all ages, but especially those who have experienced the death of a loved one. If you've been through that, you realize how planning ahead can provide peace to your survivors. I have a comprehensive online course called the End of Life Peace Plan that covers aspects such as identifying our spiritual beliefs, making sure your legal affairs are in place, deciding what happens to your body, and most important, creating a circle of caring, and then having conversations with those people about your wishes. As Jeff so aptly said last week, planning is loving in the deepest sense of that word, and I am here to support you all.
Thanks so much, Johanna. Next, I'm glad to introduce to you Karen Griffith, who is with us today as our guest. And she's going to talk more about her background and share with us about Death with Dignity in Washington. Thanks, Karen.
Hi, everyone. I'm a volunteer client advisor with End of Life Washington and have been doing this work for over 8 years. And what we do is we help people have excellent end-of-life experiences as they leave this world. And my specialty is helping people navigate through the Death with Dignity law, making sure that they get through it as stress-free as they possibly can, and then be with them on the day they take their medication and pass on. So I thought in our just very short period of time, I would talk about a couple of things. First of all, what are the requirements, or maybe we could say restrictions, but requirements to use the law? So first of all, you have to be 18 years of age or older. Secondly, you have to be a resident of the state of Washington. Third, you have to be diagnosed with a terminal illness, and it is exactly the same requirement as hospice has. So with hospice, terminal illness, 6 months or less to live, same with End of Life Washington. The next, you have to be told by your physician, I just repeat myself, that you have 6 months or less to live. You have to be mentally capable of making this decision. And unfortunately, what that sort of eliminates is people that have dementia or Alzheimer's of some sort. And you must be able to physically ingest the medication, and that could be either orally or through a feeding tube or rectally. We've even had that on occasion. So let me show you sort of a little chart that shows you what the process is for people to be able to tap into the Death with Dignity process. So it starts with a patient obviously being given a terminal diagnosis, but then making that decision that they want to sort of take the manner and the timing of their end of the life sort of into their own hands. And so they make a first oral request of their physician, and the physician must record it in their medical record that, yes, my patient has asked for this. And if the physician is supportive of his or her client using the law, then that physician may become either an attending physician or a consulting physician, and I'll describe the difference in a minute. If that physician says, you know, my hands are tied, I am with St. Michael's Hospital, or I'm with, you know, Providence or wherever, then what we'll do is help that client find a doctor who is supportive. So when that first oral request occurs, it starts the clock. So that begins at what we call a 15-day process. And during that time, a couple of things have to take place. Secondly, the first thing that happens after the first oral request is to find what we call a consulting physician. And this is a physician who simply seconds the opinion of the first in that, yes, indeed, this person has a terminal illness, and says, I agree to support them in using death with dignity. The only piece of paperwork that the client, we call them clients, hospice calls them patients, the only paperwork that the client has to fill out is something called a request for medication. It's a one-page form that they have to say, I'm of sound mind, nobody's twisted my arm, nobody's made me do this, I do it willingly, I've told my family, or I don't have any family to tell, etc. And it's witnessed by a couple of people and returned to the doctor. And on the 15th day, if the written request has been submitted prior to that, the doctor can write the prescription, or excuse me, the client makes the second oral request, at which time the doctor can write the prescription. And not every pharmacy in the state can handle the medication. It has to be done through a compounding pharmacy. And once the client gets their medication, it is totally up to them when they choose to use it. And they maybe can sit on it for several months before they decide to use it, or maybe they want to use it they may want to use it immediately. Now I see a question first. Are they able to take the medication? Let me just look at that real quick because it'll look real timely. Does it mean the dying person able to administer the medication themselves without assistance? Yes, they must be able to drink the medication. It's a liquid. It's about 1/3 of a cup of liquid, or press the syringe if it's a PEG tube or if it is a rectal administration. So yes, they have to be physically capable of that. Now, in the minute I have left, I want to say, oh, how much does the prescription cost? And it is anywhere from about $750, and we've got a pharmacist up here in Port Angeles that charges over $1,400. But let's just say it can be obtained between $750 to $800. Why does somebody do this? Why does somebody end their life early instead of going to the end with the loving care of hospice? And we ask our clients all the time, why do you choose to do this? And the three biggest reasons are loss of autonomy, loss of being able to do the things that I was always able to do before, and loss of dignity. And the other question I got is, let me look real quick because I think my time is almost done. Is there a shelf life for the medication? Yes, 6 months. What is the recipe and where can we find it? The recipe is very complicated, and it's really up to the pharmacy to have that recipe as well as the doctor. So it isn't anything we publish, but it's essentially morphine, diazepam, propranolol, and phenobarbital in a compounded mixture that's mixed with some liquid medication. I'm happy to give you my cell phone if you want to write this down. So you see my name on the screen, and my cell phone is 865-0466. And I cover the Kitsap and Olympic Peninsula. And so I'm happy to talk with you. We're still making, with very careful PPE requirements, we're still making some appointments with people on their death day to be with them. And we're doing a lot of phone call, but I am very happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Karen, I want to add to your comments that our medical director at Multicare will function as a consulting physician. That's something that she has acted in the past, I believe,
Fabulous.
and is willing to do. And our hospice team will support this process in any way we can. So if patients choose to do this, we support it in the same way, doing everything but administer the medication. So
we
we're
work
there.
with Multicare a lot, so we love Multicare. Thank you. Thank you,
Yep.
Stephen.
Karen, I see one more question, and we have time for that. Why are you an advocate for death with dignity?
Well, I worked in hospice before I moved up here. I worked in hospice for 4 or 5 years before I retired, and I just was around death a lot, and I was comfortable with it. I was with my dad the last 4 months of his life. I was with my brother-in-law as he died. And when I came up here to retire and find a volunteer job, I heard about, at the time it was called Compassion and Choices. Some of you may know it from that old name, but I heard about it and I said, oh my gosh, this is my dream volunteer work. It just feels like a passion for me, and I love doing it, and it's not depressing. And Stephen will tell you that too. Hospice work isn't depressing, it's very fulfilling. And thank you for letting me be here tonight. I've really enjoyed what I've heard so far. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Karen. We appreciate you coming with us tonight. Ren, what can you tell us about burials?
Well, I am going to actually introduce Tim Cook from Cook Funeral Home, and I'll take my comments about burials at Grace and move them to some comments I'll make at the end about our pastoral care team and other ways that Grace supports families at the end of life. Tim Cook is someone I've worked with quite a bit in my short time at Grace, and I've really been honored to partner with him. So I'm glad to introduce him to you now. You know what? I don't know.
I'm looking for Tim right now to make sure he can unmute.
Yeah.
Sorry.
How's that? A little better?
Oh, great. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, good deal. I Zoom is a little bit new for me, so it's been interesting. And I've had some technical difficulties, so I'm working from a phone, actually my wife's phone. So, but no, I've had the honor of working with Ren and everyone at Grace, and actually a lot of the folks that have preceded me here this evening, and they are all wonderful group of individuals. Multicare Hospice, I have nothing but the highest level of respect for them and their people. That is a difficult job, and all those involved in the Death with Dignity, and Johanna Munson, I had the honor of caring for her dad, and I think it's great that Johanna is following through with the death doula. We have a unique group here on the island, which I think adds a lot of value and a lot of importance to these funeral services, regardless of people's choices. We have some new choices now. We have, in addition to cremation and burial, which I'll get to in just a moment, we have aquamation, which is flameless cremation, done through an alkaline hydrolysis type system. And we are in the process of becoming certified. We took over Hillcrest Cemetery on Bainbridge Island about 2 years ago. And we are right now in the certification process from the Green Burial Council to make Hillcrest Cemetery a truly certified green cemetery. So what that means is no caskets, no vaults, no embalming. You are literally wrapped in a shroud and placed into the ground if that's what you choose. You can use handmade baskets, things of that sort. if you wish. And we get those here locally from a company called Passages, all environmentally friendly. And it has just really become something that folks have taken to. They've asked us for it. We pursued it and moved forward, and it's working out well. As a matter of fact, if I may, Johanna's dad was the first one at Hillcrest that chose that option. So he was the start of it all there. So we do appreciate the trust they had in us, because we were brand new to it as well. So the questions for cremation and burial, I guess the two choices that everybody thinks of. Obviously changing with all the new green type services, but the difference between a burial and a cremation is not nearly as big a difference as people think. We all look at cremation as quick, simple, final, and easy to do. And it doesn't have to at all be that way. Cremation is actually a disposition, just like burial. So the disposition in a burial service is the burial at the cemetery. Cremation is the final disposition in what can be a traditional service should a family choose. So you can have viewings, you can have services. Obviously, with the pandemic, it's been a bit difficult to do that. We are allowed to have a quarter of our capacity indoors currently at any venue, and we can have up to 50 people, I've heard recently, outside. Obviously getting more difficult with the weather conditions changing. So at a cemetery, at an outdoor area where you can have an urn or what have you, you're able to spread out a bit. We've been taking great precautions. We have not stopped any services to anyone. We still go to people's homes. COVID, even though it is, obviously a dangerous thing, we just ask that people make us aware of it so we can protect ourselves and the folks that work with us, and you will not be shown any different care whatsoever, other than the fact that we will take the extra precautions needed to protect not only us, but yourself as well. So nothing changes. I am going to say, I see a question has popped up. I can't quite see it because of the phone screen that I have. So if Kim, if you want to, if you don't mind, I'd appreciate it.
Of course. The question is, what is the process from the time that someone dies until the time a family picks up the person's cremains?
Oh, okay. That's a great question. So obviously the first thing that happens is we take the individual into our care. So sometimes there are folks that are donors, whether it be through an eye donation or an organ donation, which can delay the process of us actually receiving the person after they've passed. From that point, the next step is to contact the doctor or hospice doctors and get them on board to sign the death certificate, provide us with the medical information. And this is all done electronically through what's called the Electronic Death Registration System, or EDRS in Washington. During that time, we're working with the family as well. We're gathering the vital statistic information to complete our portion of the death certificate. These things all come together electronically. Once that certificate is complete, it's sent to the family for final approval to make sure that everything is spelled correctly, that the causes of death are reflective of the illness that the person was dealing with. Doctors occasionally can make a mistake or not put something down as clearly as the family would like. And the family has the right to request that it be adjusted. And that's fine. And we're more than happy to do that and work with them on that. Just like our side, we're human. We make mistakes. We want to make sure that document's correct. So once that's complete, then we file it with the county via the state system. And that generates a disposition permit. So the disposition permit allows us to move forward with the cremation, along with the documentation that we get the families to sign. So a family has to sign a cremation authorization, and we normally will have them sign a release authorization that allows us to have in writing that we had the right to take the individual into our care. The cremation is then scheduled at the crematory. It'll take place usually within, it really is dependent on two things. One is the doctor's response to our request for causes of death. And the other is the family's responsiveness. How quickly are they providing the information to us as well? We find that normally it's about a 7 to 10 day process at the longest point. And that's start to finish. And the family then comes to the funeral home and will pick up the urn and take it back into their care, or have us handle whatever the disposition may be, scattering or burial or what have you. So during the time frame the person is in that system and in that process, we're also working with the family to ensure they understand how to settle the estate, how many death certificates they'll need, notifying Social Security, how to notify banks, get information for veterans, if they are veterans, and then discussing what type of a service or final placement they would like for the urn afterward. A great example is your church. You have that beautiful columbarium there that is open to the members, I believe. Am I correct on that, Kim? Is it membership only for your columbarium, just like the other church?
Ren, do you have some
Or rent?
information on that?
I have to refer to the policies, but my thinking is that if someone made that request to be there, we'd do whatever we could to try to accommodate it.
Right. Okay, nice. No, and it's a great spot. It truly is. I think that there's no place more fitting than a place like Grace, or I know Bethany has a place, or not Bethany. Actually, Bethany does. Bethany Lutheran and the Presbyterian Church here has the same type of a thing. A lot of folks spend their life in a church. It's their home. It's their family. It's where they go for support. It's beautiful to have to be able to be placed there as well. So I think that's great. So I saw a question go by about pre-planning. We do offer pre-planning. Pre-planning is done through either an insurance or an annuity. They're very specific though. It's not like a New York Life. We use the different things to, sorry if you're seeing that. I got a email dropping down over my screen here. The annuity is for folks who want to spend down for Medicaid. They have to make it irrevocable. We do that. Somebody that's older that the insurance doesn't really make sense for them. The pre-planning insurance, we use a company called United Heritage, which what it does is it doesn't guarantee price won't go up. It simply guarantees that your family will never pay more for it. So it's designed to have interest build up on the account to offset rising costs in the future. And it can be transferred over to an irrevocable trust if needed. And irrevocability gives you the option in Medicaid situations where people are spending down. Medicaid looks at your assets, your ability to reimburse them, and you can understand why. They're going to go into a big cost to care for you, and they look for ways to get reimbursed so they can continue their care for others. So this gives you the ability to have the service that you want, and it's looked at as a zero balance asset. So the Medicaid can't bump you out because you have this annuity irrevocably in place for your burial. So I don't know how much time that was. Hopefully that was about the right time.
That was great. And you're an old hand at Zoom now, so thanks.
I am, yeah. Just
Yeah.
give you a little real quick before I go. I'm getting there anyway. I think it's like my first or second Zoom. So we'll see how it goes.
Awesome.
Just to give you a little back, I'm a fourth generation funeral director. My great grandfather started in 1890 in Philadelphia, and my family still operates that funeral home today. And this funeral home, Cook family, is 80 years old this year. We are 2 years older than Bainbridge Island Fire Department, believe it or not. So kind of a neat bit of history I'm proudly part of. My wife and I both. So thanks for having me.
And there's a great website if you all want to know more with an
Absolutely.
email address on there and a telephone number too. So thank you so much, Tim. Really
You're welcome.
appreciate
Any
you.
questions, feel free to send me questions anytime you wish by email. I'm more than happy to answer them for you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
I have one other question. Just this is a tidbit, but when someone dies, I know that if hospice is there, I believe they call the coroner, but if hospice is not there, what does the family need to do?
So when hospice is involved, the coroner normally is not involved because hospice can,
Okay.
persons on hospice, they have a diagnosed illness that's going to ultimately end their life. When there's no hospice involved, and we run into this problem where there's no doctor involved either. Person just didn't go to the doctors, hasn't been to the doctors in a while. If it's an unexpected death, the coroner's involved because you would call 911. And the police and rescue show up, and they will, if they feel it's an unexpected death, they will call the coroner in to rule out any foul play or anything that may have been unseen. If it was an expected death without any backup from hospice, 911 still called. And I want to give people a little advice. If you have to call 911 and you know the person has passed and they've been sick and you just haven't gotten to hospice yet, or you didn't think you were quite ready for that point, and something happens, you can ask rescue to do a silent approach. A lot of people get upset because they feel that everybody's going to come blaring sirens into the neighborhood. Just pick up the phone, call 911, tell them you think your loved one has passed and you would like them to come in with a silent approach. And they will come in quiet so that if it's in the middle of the night, you won't have everybody out trying to figure out what's happening. And they're very respectful of that. We have wonderful people on the island here. They're all professionals in the county, actually. True professionals here. Coroner's amazing. You got a lot of backup. If you're ever in doubt, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we are available. Pick up the phone, give me a call. I will walk you through it. It can be a really scary time for folks. We're here to support you, and we are available to you 24/7. So if somebody calls at 3 a.m., we respond to their home or place of death. So we're always available to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good to see you, Ren.
No, and I'm glad you asked that, Ren, because that's really valuable information. Thank you. Next, I'm really glad that Mark Cruz is here with us tonight. Mark Cruz is a financial planner in our church, in our community. I know many of you know him. Mark, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, and everyone. It's good to see you and a lot of familiar faces here. While I don't want to rush it, I do expect to eventually reside in the East Columbarium, by the way. So, it's certainly a privilege to talk about this. Takes courage, and it's personal, and oftentimes ends up being very private. So to make it not private, I think is part of the pattern of better addressing it. I serve as a financial planner. I've been going down to an office next to Pegasus for many years now. Basically what that means is it addresses 5 general areas of financial experience. It's either tied to HR or benefits, insurance, investment, tax, or pay. And obviously we're going to talk a little bit about not estate planning, that's going to be Amanda's work in a minute, but preparation for that stage of someone's life. Each section that I just described actually works together. They end up working as a strategic whole. And it's not readily apparent earlier in life, but as it tends to be as you go through life, you begin to see that there are usages for each of those areas that can be helpful to the other. So what I do is set those kinds of strategies with people and maintain long-term relationships with individuals and trustees, small businesses, setting and achieving their goals. So when it comes to estate planning, it usually is a later part of my relationships. And it's because, again, it takes a while for those types of depth of conversations and communication to reach that place. That's what's a little bit different about tonight, is that we're kind of starting at a place that oftentimes is far later in the relationships that I maintain with people. But oftentimes the repeated refrain, particularly among couples, individuals, is I don't want to be a burden on my kids, right? Common. In fact, oftentimes when couples reach a certain age, I begin to ask more often, can I meet one of your adult children? Because oftentimes they're the executor or the executrix. They're the person who's going to be handling or helping or administering their end-of-life considerations, right? And while you can put those into a document and have them read someday at a table, I collaborate with many attorneys and CPAs types around those situations. It's the context, it's the narrative of the relationship that I'm maintaining that I think really eases parts of these transitions. It's got to be a real privilege because, again, it's personal and financial planning, right? So I want to show you a few things tonight. I noticed here's 31 participants, right? So there's 31 different financial conditions here. I can't really think of one that would be relevant to all 31 of you. So instead, I'd like to keep some things fairly basic and organizational about this thing called end of life. So if I can navigate Zoom here and share my screen, hold on a second. First one I'd like to show you is a pretty simple organizational strategy. Can everybody see that the words payable on death?
Do.
You nod a little bit? Okay.
Yep.
So I just referenced a website tonight instead of a separate document. Oftentimes people don't fully recognize how their assets at banks, maybe at brokerages, if they have those kinds of assets, how they're titled. And that's important, particularly at this stage of life. And so oftentimes people who are navigating the loss of a loved one who may have had suitable assets to take care of the transition can leave them a bit in a lurch because the assets are frozen. Oftentimes it's because it's in the individual's name alone at the bank, right? That short-term need for money. And what I'm showing you here is a free thing to do. Let me use an example. You know, John and Mary are a couple. They happen to maintain separate bank savings and checking accounts, and that's very common. John passes away. Mary is the executor trying to handle financial expenses tied to this passing, and she has no access to the account. The bank has frozen it because John has passed away, right? So one way to circumvent that legitimately is to go to the bank and ask them about this. Ask them for a payable on death form. It's free to do. It places a beneficiary election on these types of accounts, okay? So back to my scenario of John passes away, the POD form kicks in or is activated, and Mary, who is listed as the recipient or the new owner for this taxable account, will have access to the funds, right? Pay for the burial, take care of some things that are tied to this, the memorial, whatnot. So that's one idea. Now, there's also something called transfer on death. That's TOD. I'm throwing a lot of jargon at you, but that applies to brokerage accounts, okay? So these are just some simple administrative types of procedures that are one of many that go into this stage of relationships that I've experienced with people. Another idea, or something I'd like to share with you, if I can get myself back to the screen here. Hold on, please. Oh, there it is. New share. This is an organizer, and it is the mother of all organizers. And again, we have a lot of people on this call that have different levels of being able to organize their affairs. I'm going to leave this with Kim, and if you email her, hopefully she'll send this to you. I'm sure she will. And the reason I want to share this with you is because I can't tell you how often in interacting at this stage of people's financial lives where the adult daughter or son or the personal representative is left in a lurch because of some missing piece of data. Increasingly, it's an internet user PIN, right? It's what they don't know sometimes that I think can be as impeding to their work trying to help you as the deceased. And so let me show you here. If you click on these, it'll take you to every other tab here at the bottom, right? So I'm going to click on important contacts. So, and I'll get rid of me, by the way. This is a template. But this is a form that'll allow you to put in every relevant, in this case, important contact, right? And even add others that you want. Now, if you go back to TOC, say you're of a means where you have retirement, Social Security types of accounts and information that you want to take care of. Again, you can list it here. Again, this is for you, and I strongly suggest taking it a bit at a time. I'll show you why. It's really large. This could take literally 10 Saturday mornings. But upon being done with it, there's the peace of mind that is of an asset value, I think, right? And it's keeping it all in one place. And so please do ask him for that. I think that that's a great place to start if you haven't already, in putting your affairs in that kind of order. Again, those pieces are going to bring out conversation as you do them with your loved ones too. And I think it's in that conversation that, you know, the whole's worth more than the parts there, right? You'll be able to get closer to the people who will be serving in those roles. There's a context here that's tied to the data. So in any case, I hope that's helpful. And by all means, you know, if you're interested in that document, that organizational document, then please email Kim.
Mark, there's a question here, a couple questions actually. What is the approximate cost for the Brackenwood organizer tool?
Oh, please free. That's please just ask Kim. And I'm going to take my name up there too. I just pulled that up. So
that's wonderful. Thank you.
Yep.
And it seems like that'd be a great gift to give to your children. And so, you know, just have all that data in one place, really.
It is. I think that it also changes. It's something that one might want to customarily update. But even down to, you know, what are your utility providers, different account numbers. We leave a trail. We leave a trail in life, and this is a way to track it down. So
there's another question here, Mark. How is this data kept secure? Oh,
okay. So that is a separate Excel file. So I would suggest if you have a safety box, it could be printed. That would be one way to then, you know, eliminate the compute file. It's not a cloud-based or uploaded file, although one could use that kind of service. It really depends on what your internet or your internet or security hygiene is. It's interesting. It varies by the client. One of those sticks, possibly, you could load it onto that and take it to a safety box. But.
Great.
Sorry. By the way, you can also put a security code in Excel docs. You can put a pin in that will not open the document and fully unless you know that code. So.
Great. If you give your beneficiaries POA, will that give them access to your finances?
Please repeat.
And Flory, maybe Flory's asking this question. Flory, is there anything I should add to that question?
You were talking about POD in the first part of your presentation.
Oh yes.
And having your assets frozen. So if you give your beneficiaries power of attorney, will that give them access to your bank accounts and that sort of thing?
It may. It depends by the case. It depends by the bank, but I don't think so. I think it's something that is increasingly dictated by the actual account. And so in this case, I don't want to cause concern here. I'm just saying that if an account is titled in a single person's name, it will enter into, and Amanda may be able to add to this in a minute, it'll enter into the probate process. It'll enter into the longer process. The POD is a form of will substitute. It's a little more jarred for you. I know I'm running over my time, but that basically, I don't want to use the word circumvent again, but it is a quick way of transferring title apart from a will's directions. And so it should facilitate the beneficiary's usage of the money. That's the goal.
Well, thanks so much, Mark. I'm sure if you have any other questions for Mark, you can email me, or if you have his email address, I'm sure he'll be happy to answer them. Thank you very much.
You're
And
welcome.
Amanda Grossman, who is a lawyer and a member of Grace, is here with us to talk some more about wills and other things. Amanda?
Sorry. Okay. If I could just jump right on that last question, Mark's it was going in exactly the right direction. The power of attorney is a durable power of attorney, which means it is for the duration of the person's life. So the problem is when that person passes away, that power of attorney is technically over. So that is the problem with that. It sometimes works anyway. Technically, it shouldn't. So it's just like Mark was saying. It really is how the account is held until probate happens. It can be very difficult to get into those things. So I would like to just. Well, first of all, I practice primarily in estate planning and probate, and my office is in Paulsbo. And I'm going to share screen here. All right, so I'd like to just start with kind of a little overview for us here of kind of a typical estate plan. And much like Mark said, for every one of us in the room here, our estate plan will be completely and wildly different with some main themes. So I like to kind of try and organize it in these sort of eight overview topics, a lot of which we've already talked about in previous sessions. So tonight I'll be touching briefly on wills and a personal property list and a community property agreement. And going down to number 2 and 3, we've talked a little bit about the powers of attorney for healthcare, and then the financial powers of attorney would be for things like those bank accounts and your financial accounts and other things that need to be done business related. And we've talked about in prior sessions your directive to physicians or advanced directives under number 4. And tonight we heard about our funeral arrangements and remains. And then going on down your retirement and your investment accounts and other such accounts. And then I also recommend that my clients keep your life insurance and other similar policies all in one binder or box or folder or however you organize yourself. And then lastly, tonight I'll just do a quick touch on those passwords. Just what Mark said about that makes it difficult for people, whether or not the person has passed away or is just temporarily, incapacitated. They've had a surgery and they just need some bills paid or access to some money. That can be a real challenge. So let's just talk about wills. So what happens if you don't have a will? Well, in the state of Washington, your property will pass strictly according to Washington state law. And just to bore everyone completely, because it's after 8 o'clock, here's your Washington state statute here. And this tells how your property will be distributed if you don't have a will. And subtopic 1 is if you're married or have a domestic partner, it goes that way. And I'll just direct your attention down to number 2. If you're not married or don't have a domestic partner, it goes basically to your kids, your parents, and then I really like how we call your siblings is 2C, is your issue of your parents. So those are your siblings. And why this is important to look at is this is what happens if you don't have a will or a community property agreement. It goes strictly by these rules. And that might be okay, or you might not want it to go like that because, well, let's talk about stepkids. So I'm a stepkid, and under Washington state law, that law we just looked at, I get nothing if who I call my dad, he raised me since I was a small kid. If he passes away without a will, I don't get anything. Fortunately, he's got a will. It's right over there, and I'm in it, so that's really great. But if you've got stepkids and you want them to get something, they need to be in your will. The other thing people are really surprised to find out about are half siblings. If you die without a will, your half brother or half sister that you maybe haven't seen in decades or don't know very well would take equally under Washington state law as your sister, who's also your best friend and lives next door. So that's also really surprising when people find out about that. So now that that scary stuff is over, let's talk about the fun things a will can do for us. Wills will vary wildly on people's just what they want to do and the complexity of their estate. And people like to get really creative and do some fun things. So this is kind of nice to think about as we reflect on our lives here. A will must be signed by 2 witnesses to be valid in the state of Washington. So we can't just write a heartfelt letter and put it in our safe. It won't work. We'll be back to that Washington statute, and our belongings will pass like that. So it's got to be signed and witnessed by 2 people that are not related or taken under the will. Here's a typical kind of a will. You know, I give all of my estate to my spouse if she survives me. If she does not survive me, then my estate shall pay 10% to my church, 10% to KUOW, and the remainder to be divided between my 3 children equally. So we're a little bit shorter on time, so maybe we can just do a mental exercise here as people kind of think about what's really important to you. Who are those people, the organizations, Kitsap Humane Society, you know, think about what really matters most to you. And that's what you get to do in your will, and you can really do it however you want. Another fun thing that goes along with the will is your personal property list. If you choose to do one, you can name specific things like a china set or special jewelry, or your Mad magazine collection can go to your cousin Alfred, whatever you want. And that's a really nice thing to leave to leave behind. And it's people like to write a little note with it, and that makes it all the more special. You know, your gardening tools to your neighbor, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be things of high value. And I can't see the chat window for some reason. So if anyone's asking questions, I'm not sure how I get that. Let's see if I can.
I don't see any questions yet, Amanda.
Okay. All right, good.
I'll let you know.
Flag me if, okay. And then, okay, so another important thing our will can do for us is that name guardians of minor children and how the funds for them can be held in trust for young children or those with special needs. Really important thing to think about. And this is really hard. It's really hard sometimes to come up with those people. Well, who would care for my children if I pass away? It's even harder if you've already passed away and everyone else is trying to figure it out. So it's a hard conversation to have and a hard thing to think about, but really important. And all of this can be clearly laid out in your will with alternates too. You don't have to just pick the perfect person. Name 3 or 4 alternates, and it is really helpful if it's ever needed. And minors who inherit a lot of money, or even when they turn 18, what you don't want to have happen is your grandson turns 18 and inherits your $100,000 and he goes and buys a Ferrari, right? We maybe don't want that to happen. So you can set that up in your will to where any minors, any of your grandkids or nieces and nephews, your children, maybe you want them to get their disbursement for things as needed until age 25, and then they can get half of the lump sum, or maybe at age 30 they can get the other half, and you can stipulate that it be used for things like education or a business loan or a down payment on a house. As much fun as that Ferrari sounds. And then we talked a little bit about the personal representative or your executor. And that's the person who is going to close down your estate, who will go into those bank accounts and collect all of your assets, pay your final bills, sell any property if it needs to be sold, and then distribute that to your heirs. That person, it can be whoever you want. It doesn't have to be your spouse or your kids, although it typically is. And you'd want to name 2 or 3 alternate persons to do that, just in case that person is not available or simply just doesn't want to do it, or they're not able to. It can really interfere. The grieving process can really interfere with that. So it's nice to have a few alternates who can handle that business for you and close down your estate. So.
Amanda, there's a question here. Once a child turns 18, do you no longer need to identify a guardian?
That's true, right. And an 18-year-old then would be an adult, and unless there's some medical reason or a special needs reason for them to have a guardian, they would not have one. And then I won't go too much into taxes, but another important function of wills is in the state of Washington, we have an estate tax, and wills can be crafted to avoid estate tax in some circumstances if you'd like that. And that saves money for your heirs or charities, people you'd rather have the money go to instead of the state of Washington. Although I recently had a client told me, I like the state of Washington. I think I'm just fine with the estate tax. She wanted it to go to roads and schools and everything. And I thought that was great. But there are options if you don't want to go that route. So you may have heard that Washington is a community property state. And so if you're a married person or a person in a registered domestic relationship, do you still need a will? Well, my answer is yes. What if you die at the same time? You know, you're on the ferry goes down. Well, what happens if there's no survivor of the two of you? That's where your will kicks in. And otherwise, we'd be back to that intestacy statute that you may or may not want your property to go through. A really wonderful and magical document in the state of Washington here, we have the option to have a community property agreement, which is an agreement between married people or registered domestic partners. And that, depending on how it's written, would give all community property and separate property to the surviving spouse sort of automatically. It works to avoid probate after the death of the first spouse, and that can be a really nice thing. We take that community property agreement and down to the county and we record it, and for $20 you avoid probate entirely, and you can use that document and the documents that follow from that to get into the bank accounts, transfer the house, transfer the car, any other property into the surviving spouse's name only, and it's fairly easy and cheap to do it that way. And then, so probate. You may have heard of probate, and in a lot of states, it's kind of a bad word. It's a long and expensive, drawn-out process. Truthfully, in Washington, it's not a bad thing here, like it is in maybe California, where it's expensive and the lawyers get all the money, and it takes a long time. It is truly the process of closing the decedent's estate, and it's a relatively short process. On average, between 6 to 12 months is the probate process. But during that time, it doesn't mean that no money is available from the estate. Things can still move, heirs can still get disbursements, property can be sold. But during that time, the executor, the personal representative, would be closing down bank accounts and selling the property, making sure the taxes and creditors are paid, and then with what's left over, distributing that to the beneficiaries. And then Mark talked about the non-probate assets and beneficiary designations with your retirement accounts, financial accounts, life insurance policies. And it's just really important to, in conjunction with all of this estate planning, look at each of those and see if they're up to date. You know, is your ex-wife on that life insurance policy? You may want to check that every few years and just make sure all of those things jive with your wishes for your overall estate plan. And then not to be overly repetitive here, but this is something I've been seeing more and more lately. The surviving spouse comes in and just can't get into really important things, and it's usually internet related. But even things like passwords on a phone, just to, you know, get the pictures of the grandkids off there, that can be a real challenge. So I recommend, like Mark was saying, a hard copy, print it out, something just handwritten or typed, doesn't have to be anything fancy, but it can just be, it can be a real stress saver for the survivor. In our family, we've started using a password app manager on the phone. It's on our phone and computer. And so now I only have to remember one password. And that's actually the name of the app that we use, is 1Password, but there are many. And even better now, it has a facial recognition feature, so I don't have to even remember that 1Password. I just show up my face and it opens up, and then all of my passwords are in there. And the really cool thing about this one is that it has an option for doing that printout from there. You can print out a hard copy and then put that in with your important papers. And you can also put an executor account access in there so that your personal representative, and I presume your power of attorney could get in there if need be and access those passwords if they need to. Anybody have any questions for me?
Thanks so much, Amanda. That was wonderful. And thank you to all our facilitators tonight. I'm going to turn it over to Ren Blessing in just a second, who's going, she'll be talking about the role of the church and some of the things we just talked about. And I just want to thank all of you who were here. It was like drinking out of a fire hose a little bit. There was a lot of information, and thank you for sticking with us. Next time, for our last session together, we'll be doing something a little bit more laid back. We'll be talking about having hard conversations, how to take all of what we've learned and worked on, or maybe working on, and having those conversations with our families, and also be talking about family systems and family dynamics. And then we will end our time together by talking about funerals and how you can begin to plan your own funeral or contribute to loved ones' funeral plans at Grace. So please do stay for an extra 5 minutes if you can. If you can't, we understand. But thank you so much. And Ren, thank you for wrapping up for us tonight.
Thank you. I have lots of information here, and I also am around, and you know how to find me. So I'm going to hit the highlights, and this is a conversation I'm always really happy to have with anyone at Grace. I want to share with you some of the many ways we can walk with you as you're approaching the end of life. First, I want to say that there are lots of ways that our pastoral care team can support, and our tribes and others at Grace can support. And there's a list here of ways that you might find support at Grace. The important thing is that we're going to rely on you to tell us what's helpful. And sometimes at a stressful time in life, it's not helpful to have people getting in the way of the important work that you need to do. So if you're in a situation and you can't figure out what help you need, we have a discernment team, and we have members of our pastoral care team who would be happy to do that discernment work. And then once you're able to discern what might be helpful in the season where you are, or in the week where you are, I hope that you'll speak up. All it takes is a text to me or an email or a phone call to anybody on our pastoral care team, and we can get moving to try to support in ways that are helpful. Then as people are moving closer toward the end of life, memorial planning is really important. That's something we'll talk about next week. At the very end of life, you hear about last rites, and I want to clarify what that is. There's a lot of information here that we can't get to, but what I want to say is that when I come at Grace, I don't always wear a collar, but when I show up in my collar, I'm representing the whole church. I'm representing the whole congregation. And so I'm there as a personal support, absolutely, but I'm also there as a sign of the whole church walking with you in the place where you are. It's really important to intentionally cross the threshold into death if we can. And I'm there to be with you for that. I'm there to be with your family, and members of our pastoral care team can also be present. Last rites can be any of the following things. It can be a simple time of prayer. It can be an anointing. It can be a time of confession and absolution if that's desired. It can be a celebration of Eucharist. And you also don't have to worry about like doing it at the wrong time, because if we celebrate Eucharist together and then you live another 2 months, we'll do it again, and there's nothing lost there. The thing that I like to do best at the end of life is actually to remember with someone as I'm anointing them, to anoint their eyes and remember what they've seen in their life, and to anoint their mouth and to remember what they've tasted, and to anoint their hands and think together about what they've touched. Sometimes, so we could go through that. Sometimes that's a really good thing to do when someone is conscious and able to share those memories. I've done it with people's bodies after they've died, and it's a beautiful thing for families to be able to name at a time of death and to really call to mind the distinctive personality and delights of that person, so that it's not just so that I think sorrow can feel really heavy and like it covers everything else. And one of the beautiful things we can do at a time of grief is to name the distinctive, beautiful parts of a person's life and to remember beyond the sickness. So that's something I love to do with families if they would like me to do that. I'm going to leave this document with Kim so you can read more about why we anoint with oil if you'd like on your own. And one thing we'll talk about next week is that a memorial service is a baptismal service. So you'll see a lot of resonances as we look at our funerals, but also when we're baptized, we're anointed with oil. And you've heard me say that, you know, we tell our kids that that glows in the dark, and God can see down in the dark and see that oil glowing, and it never goes away, but that's something we remember when we anoint with oil at death. And it can be a sign of hope. Please do call me or Stephen. Our numbers are there. My phone's on. So if you text me in the middle of the night and it's not about pastoral care, I'm annoyed because I wake up when my phone rings in the middle of the night. But if it is about pastoral care, I want you to text me. Stephen and I now split the month. So if you're unsure who's on, you can text either of us, but the answering machine at Grace will direct you to the person on call if you call. And the other two quick things are that at the time of death, we will think about how to share a notice of death with the congregation. And sometimes it feels important to do that in a timely way so that it relieves the family of the responsibility of communicating that individually. So there are a couple of different ways this can work. One is that if you have the time to sketch out a biographical sketch and choose a photo with your loved one before they die, it can be really helpful. And it's nice at the time of death to have that in hand. But if you haven't gotten to do that, it can be a beautiful thing to write a biographical sketch. And we have some members of our pastoral care team who've helped people do that. We also can not include it in memoriam if we just want to get it out, and we can share it later in an obituary. The other thing that often comes up is that people will have a desire to give memorial gifts, and it's really helpful to know ahead of time where your loved one would like those memorial gifts dedicated. So whether it's the Historical Society or Grace Church, and if it's Grace Church, we'd really like to know what you'd like us to do with it. And we can have it be general, but if you have a specific desire, please make that noted somewhere, and we would love to carry out your wishes and share those wishes. Finally, my comments about burial. You may be buried in the columbarium at Grace, and you can reserve that and just contact our office to do that. I also hope that we'll have an opportunity for people to be buried in the ground at Grace, but that's still developing. So as that becomes more clear, you'll certainly hear about that, and we'll share the logistics of how that would happen. When we talk about funerals, I will talk about what, if you have ashes, how those get transported. We have some beautiful bags that people have made that we use at Grace, so that if you just want to use a cardboard box, that would be fine. We also have, often people choose scarves or other things to wrap them in, but I'm happy, and our pastoral care team is happy to walk you through all of that. There's no question that's a bad question. We'd love to help with that. Thank you for hanging on. I know that took a little bit longer than intended. If you would, just wait one more minute. I will close us in prayer. Actually, you know what? I'll just close this with a really short prayer. The last thing I want to say is that the daily office, which maybe some of you pray, morning prayer and evening prayer, can be seen as a kind of practice for dying. And Compline is the bedtime prayer. And so the language of Compline is all about what it might be like to rest in death. And so some of you have actually requested at a time of death that I come and say the Compline service with you. And it's both really familiar and comforting, and also feels really true to the moment. And so I'll close tonight with just a few lines from that Compline service. Guide us waking, O Lord, and guard us sleep, that awake we may, can someone help me? That awake we may, I'm so sorry. I'll look it up. I'm sorry, it's guide us waking, O Lord, and guard us sleeping, that awake we may watch with Christ, and asleep we may rest in peace. Amen.
Amen. A big thank you to all our presenters and to all of you. Go in peace.
Thank you, Kim.
See you next week.